What you're going to hear is a piece of the audio from today's enrichment, in which the title was "We Are the Sum of Our Differences," recognizing that the differences that we have within in nature, within humanity, within ourselves, are not obstacles to our divinity, to spirit, or creation. But really, those differences are how the sacred expresses itself always. And we started the hour with an invitation to recognize unity not being created in sameness, but unity being revealed through difference. And through the tensions that we have each day, through the tensions in relationship and movement of all of life, recognizing that if we understand that creation reflects the creator, then diversity is not a flaw in the design, it is the design of creation. And that we are tasked with embracing that diversity and to learn how to cooperate, communicate with it, to work with it across all cultures, across all traditions, philosophies, our stories, our truth, knowing that creation, creator, divinity it's not an accident. None of this is an accident. And we have this beautiful power to move within it and to seek relationship for all aspects of it, knowing that what's happening in and around us and what we're recognizing is our first spiritual mirror, offering us a reflection of how creation is decoding itself in that present moment. What part of all of the diversity is revealing itself in this moment, recognizing diversity not as a division, but as a differentiation. So again, the next part that you're going to hear is actual recording from today's Sunday enrichment, which you all are invited to either virtually or in person each and every Sunday. Blessings. So just, a couple of visualizations for you. Forests survive because of the biodiversity. You can't have the same kind of tree. In fact, we know now that underneath the trees, there's all kinds of different funguses and little teeny organisms. And, you got a plethora of insects. And there was a study done with, if you took out one particular insect, or when different insects get lower in population, what happens. And I know they made a joke of it. I'm trying to remember what Disney show, I think it was Lilo and Stitch, where they made a joke about how the mosquitoes disappeared off of one place and, the whole place died, and I know we'd love to have things like mosquitoes go away, and yet they play an integral part in everything else. Ecosystems actually collapse if variety is removed. And the idea of moving forward and evolution and expansion depends on differences and different ways we approach problems. I mean, science continues because somebody looks at the same issue or question differently than the one before and expands on it. In your bodies, you have all different organs doing different things. And you need that diversity. The heart doesn't do what the lungs do. We need night and day. I know it's really, really cold right now in this winter season, but it doesn't compete with the summer. We don't go, oh, well, it has to be in this way, because we know there's a purpose to the change of seasons. In that relationship and that differences allows all life to thrive. And human difference is no less a sacred expression of nature differences. Different cultures, different temperaments, different languages, different stories about the same thing. So in the science class, the 8th graders, this past week, we started a new section called Earth and Space. And the very, very first part was listening to stories of different cultures on how they recognize the patterns of the world and the universe. So I listened to a story that was from Africa about the stars that form the Orion belt and the stars around it, and the myth that came from that. And then what I shared with the class, which is that those same stars for us, which is why we read that one, is a Greek myth. Orion is a Greek myth. And so peoples across the planet looking at the same sky, coming up with different stories and really different sets of constellations and how they put together those pictures. And it's all something that we can learn from and talk about and share with awe and inspiration. Because, rather than asking who is right and what's the right way, is what part of the whole is that revealing? What part of the whole picture is that aspect revealing to all of us? So if we think of difference as differentiation instead of difference, differentiation makes relationships more possible than saying, well, that's just different. And every spiritual tradition is touched with these kind of differentiations. Judaism teaches that faith includes wrestling. It's just as their faces are different, so are their minds different. In Christianity, Paul reminds us that there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. Hinduism says truth is one. The wise call it by many names. Many years ago, a couple ladies and I had a little studio in which we would invite people in for Qigong and yoga and healing. And there was a couple of ladies that came in to check the place out. And their question was, well, what God is this to? Which kind of threw me because, I'm like, well, your God, my God. But they really wanted their name for their recognition of God before they would even try to be with the other people in that establishment, which I thought about for a really long time and set me on a little path of finding all the different words that humanity uses for divinity and for God and for universe. And I mean, in the Hindu and Christian texts alone, there's like over 100. So, I mean, and then go from there, it's just a plethora of different versions of words for the same feeling or the same reality that there is more than us sitting here. So difference is not separation. It's interdependence made visible. So, you've heard of the yin and the yang and the symbol with the black and the white, and then the black and the white inside the black and the white. It's all visualizations for the same thing, that everything is related. Everything is connected to each other. That even though it looks separate or different, it's not separate at all. So you guys know how my brain works. So I went to, if you think about the superhero movies or the comic books, time and time again, it's different talents coming together to help. So you think about the X-Men or the Avengers, they're all different people, very different personalities. They don't always like each other, but they know that they're coming together with their differences creates a better understanding and a better way to tackle whatever's happening. The X-Men especially, it's not how do we eliminate the differences. It's how do we live together without destroying one another. If you go to Disney films, like Finding Nemo, it's all those little fish are very, very different, but it's all about resilience, not weakness. It's about using the differences and not being afraid to just be whoever you are. So there's a quote from ancient philosophy. It says, "No one steps into the same river twice." So even from breath to breath, we can find different truths, different differences, and we can integrate all of that into our whole. And if we're willing to integrate our own differences and our own steps into the river, then we can start integrating with others around us. Instead of, tiny little things, this or that, we see the complexities and the beauty. Uh, Vincent van Gogh, the Starry Night painting, did you ever see that? And the way he blends everything together. It was like, it wasn't just stars and sky. It was the blending of the whole. It's recognizing divinity as the symphony and not just the instrument in the orchestra. You can take these into your heart and you can say them silently or out loud. I honor the difference as sacred expression. I release the need for sameness. I belong without erasing myself. I listen with curiosity and humility. I trust wisdom carried by others. The divine speaks in many languages. Together, we reveal that what none of us can accomplish alone. Just a couple of closing thoughts. That unity doesn't erase differences. Unity emerges through differences. And when we honor that variation, all those different talents of creation, then we honor the Creator itself. We participate in the divine love made visible. And your unique presence matters more than I think what any of us realize.